Dario, you're sitting down there in Mexico City, and you've been unable to attend your Congress today because of a rather interesting story that, aside from one story in the Washington Post saying that Mexican politics is in trouble amidst a case of kidnapped students, we don't really hear or see much about on the mainstream media. So tell us a little bit about what's happening there and who some of the people are you're going to be talking to about it.
Sure. Well, Mexico is in political disarray really at the moment. The background is, as you said, there's 43 teacher trainees were kidnapped in a poor rural area of Guerrero, which is in the south of the country, as they were making their way to a protest. Now, they were seen being taken by force by policemen in a town called Iguela. And these police have been accused of working with local drug cartels. And this was back on the 26th of September. And the Mexican government still does not know where they are, whether they're alive or dead. Now, on November the 4th, the former Iguala mayor, called Jose Luis Arbace, he was arrested with his wife, accused of being behind these abductions. He was actually arrested in Mexico City on the run, hiding out in one of the poor areas here. Now, of course, there's been general outrage with calls for the president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, to resign. Now, accusations is that this is just another example of the interrelationship between police and organized crime. And this seems to be, after talking to people, it's an entrenched part of local politics in the rural areas. But also, it's a failure of national politicians to deal with this situation. Now, demonstrations have been taking place regularly across Mexico since these kidnappings have taken place. And there's also been demonstrations in Washington, D.C., Boston, New Haven, Los Angeles, Paris, Berlin. But as you say, Des, there hasn't been much in the sort of global media to report this.
Yeah, it's a shame that none of them decided to pull a Bill Cosby, because that seems to be the only story we seem to hear on the mainstream media. I mean, what does it take to get a story like this? I mean, Dario, you're in media. I mean, what does it take to get a story like this some attention?
Well, I really don't know. I think it's not following the kind of narrative, the global narrative that we see, which is still led by, as we've talked about with climate change, it's still led by America. So this narrative that we get is drug cartels and Mexican immigrants trying to get into the US. And these sort of political stories, I don't think have any track with the corporate media. And I'm actually interviewing a couple of students tomorrow about all this. So hopefully next week we'll have an interview package that will go out on the three muckrakers. So we'll get an inside understanding of what's been going on here and what the political sides of the story are.
I mean, well, basic stuff really. This is, but I mean, I don't. As a journalist here in Britain, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of Brits, and I'm sure, I don't understand why Barack Obama is so hated and why things are happening. You know, maybe there are problems with it. He's doing things that are problematic, but why is he so disliked? Tell me, what's going on? What is that all about? You know, all this, he's a secret Muslim, stuff. I mean, what's that all about?
Well, I hate to say this, but he's a black president.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, there's much more to that than seems on the surface. Much more. They have a problem with the black president, especially a lot of these senators are from the South that are having problems. There's a lot of racism in this country still. It's really, there's an undertone of it that, it really hasn't left since the Civil War. And that's one thing. The other thing is it's a target, for the Republicans, to politically, very good target for them. And since they control the airwaves and since they have so much influence with talk radio, they can just tear him apart and, put themselves on the platform above everybody else by doing it.
I mean, I'm talking now to two reasonable Americans, so I'm going to ask you guys. Right. America is such a bastion of fantastic things, democracy, liberty, human rights, brilliant stuff, but also nuttiness. this obsession with guns, execution, and all, and this nonsense about the immigration bill that may or may not happen. I mean, for goodness' sake, that is ridiculous. So why is America? Why are these two extremes? What's going on? What is that all about?
Robert, do you want to?
Well, the extremes. uh, hmm. I'm not sure I know how to answer that. To be honest with you. I mean, I recognize the problem, and it is two extremes. I think in part it has a lot to do with the economics, and has to do with uh, the 1% capturing the country, and it becomes divisive when all the money shifts into one room, and you have another 500 rooms where people are, getting back to our homeless story, just getting by, living in cars, whole families living in cars. But somehow that radiates throughout all of society, and it becomes them versus us type of thing, and that's kind of what it is. It's in part economic.
And I have the benefit of now being removed from it for almost 17 years and able to look at it under a different microscope.
Sides,
so
really.
you can, and it's also though a source of great frustration. But I think one of the things that has helped to amplify it is all of the activity that has taken place since 9/11. There's the general distrust of others, the general distrust of immigrants, the general distrust of fear of terrorism. A lot of this legislated under things like the Patriot Act, fires fed by an illicit news media in Fox News. I mean, there's no other way to describe what they do. If they tried to do any of the stuff that they do in the States here, they'd all be in jail for hate speech and everything else you could possibly imagine. So it is a disturbing trend to see how polarized and pulling apart of at almost every level inside the U.S. it's become as a result of this crazy news media.
The thing is, I mean, this veering off to the right of the Republicans and the Democrats to an extent to the left. I mean, basically politics is won and lost in the centre ground, left and right-ish. So why are the Republicans marching off to the right? And why, for example, have they seized the Senate and the Congress, rather? In relation to in this context.
Well,
what's that all about?
62% of those that were eligible to vote didn't even bother to show up. You basically had an election decided by 38% of those who were registered, which is not terribly different, Dario, is it, from what we've seen in some of our by-elections and European parliamentary elections? We get good turnout for the generals, about 68 to 72%. But what was the turnout for the European Parliament?
Oh, it was Wayne. It was about 30. Was it 32 or 33? I can't remember. It's absolutely terrible. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, it's interesting with this story in Mexico. I mean, the corruption here has crossed party lines there as well. So the guy who was arrested, accused of these kidnappings, is actually from one of the leftist parties here. Yet the country is governed by a centre-right party. So I think the people are really concerned about the corruption at every single level, whether it's left or right.